The overwhelming number of Zafira Touras presented on our secondary market are with a diesel engine and a manual transmission. Gasoline versions are almost as few in number as factory methane CNG ones, that is, the count is in units, not dozens, and there are few two-pedal cars offered for sale. And the price range is wide. Thus, the most inexpensive copies of the early years of production, predominantly gasoline and methane, are offered for $11,000 to $13,000. For $14,000 to $16,000 you can get both the version before and after restyling. The price largely depends on the declared condition and version. Well, the most expensive are 2.0-liter diesel cars of the latest years of production, 2017 to 2019, with rich equipment. They ask for $17,000 to $20,000, and there are offers with prices even higher. Zafira C looks solid, but it is important that it is ready to maintain this impression even after many years of use. Take, for example, the interior, the finishing materials of which stand up well to age, and the functional equipment demonstrates decent reliability even on cars of early years of production. Of course, it's not entirely without problems. For example, at one time, owners complained about malfunctions of the multimedia system, as well as xenon headlights. There was even a recall campaign on the latter issue. There was also a massive recall of vehicles due to the risk of fire due to a faulty heating system. And yet, in terms of interior and exterior, the car can safely be called durable. The paintwork is quite strong, chips appear infrequently and are in no hurry to bloom, and in general the corrosion resistance is good. This, of course, does not negate a thorough inspection before purchase, and additional anti-corrosive protection is desirable. But keeping track of the Zafira C's body is much easier than in the case of other German classmates. Having increased in size and added equipment, the Zafira C has become noticeably heavier than its predecessor by an average of 200 kilograms. Thus, the curb weight of the lightest modification is 1,500 kilograms, and the total weight is 2,150 kilograms. If we are talking about the 2.0-liter diesel version, then it weighs 1,680 and 2,445 kilograms, respectively. And for such a weight category we need appropriate engines. I have good news for you. Now, if you are planning to buy a used car, or learn more about your car, you no longer need to search for the information you need on the internet. We have collected everything in one place for you, on the website carmi.pro. Here you can find out everything about the car, what brakes and at what mileage, any problems with engines, chassis or gearboxes, which trim levels are better not to mess with, and how not to lose money buying a used car. You will learn all this on carm.pro. Let us remind you that gasoline versions are rare. And if you want the simplest and most inexpensive option to maintain, look for a 1.8-liter naturally aspirated engine with 140 horsepower. 18 XCR, the 115 horsepower version will work hard on a heavy car. Yes, it does not have very reliable ignition modules, sensors and electrical equipment in general. But in general it presents a minimum of problems, and their solution will be cheap. The main thing is not to skimp on oil, because phase shifters don't like that. The same 140 horsepower. The 1.4-liter turbo engine, A14 net, also develops, but it will have higher torque. There is also a 120 horsepower version, but it also makes little sense. At one time, this small displacement engine was noted for cases of piston destruction, and some owners also complain about increased oil consumption. But compared to modern engines, the 1.4 turbo does not look so bad, and it is designed for easy operation, cast iron block, distributed injection, hydraulic compensators, chain, but of course, not eternal, timing drive. In general, it's not the worst engine, but you should be careful when choosing and operating such a car. At the same time, it is better to give preference to models after 2013 release. The earlier versions had their drawbacks such as a short-lived pump, an unsuccessful crankshaft sealing ring, and the massive flywheel on these engines could require premature replacement. However, the problems described above were solved through service campaigns. In the third generation, Zafira also retained gas modifications, 1.4 turbo EcoFlex, 140 horsepower, runs on liquefied petroleum gas propane butane, LPG, 1.64 turbo EcoFlex, 150 horsepower, on compressed natural gas methane, CNG. We once talked about the experience of operating the second option. It is worth noting that the Z16X engine differs from its gasoline counterparts in its original pistons, valves and valve seats, as well as separate natural gas and gasoline injection systems. And let's not forget about the need for periodic checking of cylinders. There were also 1.6 turbo CD petrol engines with 170 or 200 horsepower in the line. Their features are direct fuel injection, balancer shafts, a low inertia turbine, the absence of hydraulic compensators, and a timing chain drive. The latter is not very durable, like the chain of balancer shafts. The cooling system is also considered not very reliable, and the risks of overheating are generally high. Cases of piston destruction have been reported on some engines. In general, if you want more traction and power, it is better to give preference to diesel versions. Zafira Tourer of the early years of production was equipped with various modifications of 2.0-liter CDTI engines of the A20 series with power from 110 to 165 horsepower. On cars before 2013, there is a risk of the main bearings turning due to oil starvation. The culprits are said to be a jammed oil pump pressure relief valve, or wear of the sealing ring between it and the oil receiver. So, if we are talking about cars from early years of production, it is important to clarify whether work was done to replace the O-ring and valve. There are other disadvantages as well. For example, faulty swirl flaps in the intake tract, a stuck throttle valve, oil leaks from the heat exchanger, and of course, questions about the EGR and particulate filter, if they have not already been removed. The Zafira C was also equipped with a 2.0 CDTI bi-turbo, a 20 DTR, engine with a power of 195 horsepower. It has its own fuel system with piezo injectors and double sequential charging. In general, everything is more complicated and more expensive than the regular versions, so you should think twice before getting involved with such a version. Later Zafira were equipped with engines of the B20 and D20 series, 170 horsepower. They are already free of problems with the lubrication system. The main issues are still related to the ecology. Since 2013, a 1.6-liter CDTI, 120 to 136 horsepower, began to be installed on the car. It has an aluminum block and a timing chain drive on the flywheel side. It turned out to be not very durable. It lasts about 130 to 150,000 kilometers, and replacing it due to the increased labor intensity, you have to either hang the engine or remove the box, is not cheap. Well, let us remind you that, in addition to the particulate filter, this engine has a urea injection system, which over time is also ready to cause problems. In general, not the cheapest option to maintain. On the other hand, this is one of the most common units on Opel cars of recent years of production, so a service base for it has already been created. With the exception of the 1.8-liter version, which was equipped with a 5-speed manual transmission, the remaining Zafira C modifications were equipped with 6-speed manual transmissions M32 and F40. By the time the model appeared, most of the issues regarding the M32 had been resolved, although it's still worth listening during a test drive and making sure there is no noise from the bearings. Well, remember about the expensive dual-mass flywheel. 6-speed automatic transmissions are made by GM. Depending on the modification, it will be 60/40, 60/45 or AF40, which is, in fact, a variation of the Eisen-Werner TF81. In any case, the problems are the same. A not very efficient cooling system allows for the risk of overheating, and the valve body is sensitive to oil cleanliness. Both problems are especially acute in the case of powerful versions, where the load on the box itself is higher, as is the intensity of accumulation of friction where products in the oil. So in the case of 2.0-liter diesel engines, especially when driving aggressively or towing trailers, it is better to shorten the service intervals. The suspension scheme is the same as that of the Astra J, McPherson struts at the front and a beam, supplemented by a watt mechanism, at the rear. The Astra also inherited the characteristic knocking sound of the brake calipers while driving. Sometimes shock absorbers and joints in the watt mechanism make extraneous sounds during operation, but the chassis itself is quite strong, and spare parts are inexpensive. Well, if the previous owners used the car's cargo and passenger capabilities to the fullest, don't be surprised by sagging springs. A strong body, durable interior, and inexpensive suspension are the strengths of the model. 6-speed manual transmission shouldn't present any problems either, but replacing the clutch can be expensive due to the dual-mass flywheel, so choosing an automatic also makes sense, especially if the previous owners didn't, and took care of the car. It's more difficult with motors. Gasoline ones are either weak or potentially problematic. Diesel engines are complex, and also not the standard of reliability. Still, we recommend the 2.0-liter diesel version of the latest model years. Yes, it will be more expensive to purchase, but you will not experience discomfort due to the eternal lack of power. And in terms of fuel efficiency and maintenance costs, you won't overpay anything.